And we're live. Apologies for the delay in getting started. I just ran some Windows updates. So it's your friendly neighborhood ex-Muslim, Abdullah Samir. I'm joined by someone that I was hoping to talk to for a while now, and for whatever reason, just never got down to it. And this young lady by the name of Sophia, who has gone through a lot and has suffered a lot because of Islam and because of the misogynistic culture that comes along with Islam a lot of the time. If you guys can hear me, just let me know. I just want to make sure the sound is going okay because we're having some technical problems. And Little Devil is joining me today. Sophia, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
Good, good, good. So I would guess you're a little bit nervous to do this.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
Yeah. So from what I understand, you're Pashtuni. Is that how you say it?
Yes,
Pashtun?
Pashtun. Yes.
So you speak English. Do you speak any other languages?
I speak a couple languages actually. I can speak fluently Punjabi, Hindi, Urdu, Hindi, Pashto, and I know Arabic as well, but that's not a native tongue. It's something I learned, obviously. And
Wow.
I also know a little bit of Farsi as well, and English, of course.
Wow, that's impressive. I speak English, and that's about it. So, very nice, very nice. So can you tell me a little bit about? Let's go back to the beginning. How your journey all started. You grew up. Can you tell me about maybe your family? And again, you feel free to say as little or as much as you want. You don't have to go into too much detail if you don't feel comfortable. Just say whatever you're comfortable with.
Of course. So my upbringing was mostly very conservative. Growing up as a child, it wasn't that much. I didn't really realize at the time how much it would get when I would become a woman. But as a child, I didn't really see that much. Then, as soon as I, reached a certain age, there started to be changes in my lifestyle. I was allowed to go to school for up to sixth grade. After that, I became homeschooled. Never really explained why. It was mostly just, it's not good for girls to be out there. It's a fitna. Women have to stay indoors more. They need to be more hidden. They need to stay modest. Just stuff that I was told at that age. Um, a lot of freedoms that I used to have were slowly being taken away from me. I wasn't allowed to go out anymore. I used to have a park right near my house where I used to go after school, and I stopped going there. I couldn't see my friends anymore. I couldn't hang out with people, with events. If I ever did leave the house, it was very rare, only to go to the store maybe once, probably every 4 months. And I used to go, not alone, obviously. I had to have a merham with me, either my brother or my father or someone. I had to start covering. First, it started with the hijab. Obviously, I was very young when I started wearing hijab. It was around probably 10 years old, 9, 10 years old, and I started wearing it more like strictly. And then after that came the chador, which is like a big shawl that you wear over your clothes to just kind of give you more coverage. And then after that, when I started my Islamic studies, that was the only other place I was allowed to leave, was to go to attend my Islamic classes in the evenings, which was like right next door to my house. There was a woman who was an alima. She studied in a madrasa in Pakistan, and she was teaching, and I studied by her for up to 6, 7 years. Um, and as I was studying by her, I started becoming more religious myself. Um, I started wearing jilbab or a burqa when I was around 13 or 14 years old, and then I started wearing niqab when I was 16. I was always covering my face before that too, like around my father. He kind of always expected us to cover our face, even with our scarf at least. But the niqab wasn't really something I wore until I was about 16, and then after that, I wasn't allowed to take that off. So,
Wow. And
yeah.
all of this is America.
Yes, all of this is in America. That's kind of what surprises people the most when I tell my stories. They kind of think this is happening in Pakistan or Saudi Arabia or somewhere, but it's all here in America.
And
And
when you
yes,
were going through all of this, did you notice any difference between how you were treated, like you said you were, and your brothers were treated, or your brother?
oh yes, yes, of course. And I noticed this early on. Like I knew when I was homeschooled, my brothers weren't homeschooled. They were still allowed to go. And the excuse that I was given was, well, they have to be providers, they have to work, and for them it's important to get a good job, they have to have a good education, so they need to go to school. But girls don't really need that. They can still study at home, they can still do what they need to, but they don't have to go in those type of environments as men. So obviously my brothers went to school, they were allowed to work. I wasn't allowed to work either. I was actually told that when I reached a certain age, I would get married and my husband would provide for me and I would never need to work. So that's another reason why education wasn't really that, strongly enforced in our household on girls, because it was never seen as something that was needed. And if anything, everyone says that, well, in Islam, men and women are both supposed to be educated. But the thing that I was taught was, well, I was being educated. I was being educated in Islam. I was attending Islamic studies classes, I was still getting the ta'lim I needed. But it wasn't secular education. It wasn't worldly education. It was Islamic. And the emphasis was put on Islamic education for women, not worldly education, is what I was taught. So I know a lot of Muslims have different views on this. Some say it includes both and some say it's only religious. But in my case, it was just religious. So I was, fulfilling that obligation of seeking knowledge, but it wasn't secular knowledge. And I was still studying, but I was at home. I wasn't in those environments as men were. And my brothers, obviously, they had much more freedom. They still had some restrictions. I wouldn't say they were completely free because of my family. They still kind of expected them to be a certain way too, but for the most part, they weren't. It was nowhere near as conservative and strict as it was for us, for me and my sister, obviously, and my mother.
Oh,
So
wow.
obviously, I did notice that. Yeah. But first, obviously, I started being religious, and the first thing I was well, my family, they come from a Deobandi Tablighi Jamaat background. They're Hanafi Muslims. And the first thing I learned was, the different mazhabs and the differences in Aqidah and all this. And it wasn't really touched upon that much regarding different sects until my brother, he started venturing out and he started becoming more Salafi. And there's a big conflict between Deobandis and Salafis, at least in Pakistan and here in this community that I grew up in, where the Deobandis don't really think Salafis are, good Muslims in the same way with Salafis towards Deobandis. And then some of them say you can both just get along. But with my family, it wasn't like that. So my brother became more strict and we started having conversations about different topics of Islam that I never really ventured into. I wasn't really learning those aspects. I was learning more about the jurisprudence and, Aqidah and Hadith and Quran, Tafsir, all these things. I wasn't really learning about, Ijtihad and Taqleed and these
Mhm.
topics, these
Can you
philosophical topics.
can you explain what Salafi and Deobandi is for people that don't know?
Yeah, so Deobandi is just another subsect of Sunni Islam, and there's different subsects I think of Sunni Islam. Deobandis are very strict. They don't believe in bid'ah. There's a lot of things that they do not support, especially the Sunni Muslims in Pakistan, especially the Barelvis. They're a little bit more they practice Sufism, and it's a bit different. So they really reject those things. They don't support Milad al-Nabi, for example, these festivals that are usually taking place in Pakistan. Deobandis are against that, and in this way they are very similar to Salafis and how strict they are with they're against bid'ah and everything and shirk. But I think Salafis take it a step further. They're very very straight literalist to the text, whereas the Deobandis do kind of incorporate tasawwuf into their religion, and it's more there is a spiritual element. There is they do practice Sufism, but it's not really the kind of Sufism that you generally think about. They practice bayah and Peed Muridi, whereas you have someone a mentor basically who helps you on your spiritual journey and just stuff like that. And that's the kind of thing that Salafis are really against in Deobandi Islam. And Deobandis
This is
have
all
this.
new to me because I was never exposed to the Desi sort of Islam. I don't know if you
Yeah.
should call it that or not, but I was strict, pretty much Salafi, and this wall tasawwuf and all that. Wasn't a big thing for
Yeah.
me. So you had this, so you became Salafi leaning.
Yeah, towards the end before my apostasy, I became a Salafi. Just from all these
Yeah.
discussions with my brother, I just learned so many things, and I thought, wait a minute, our religion is the way that we're following it is actually not proper, because there's some things that that I'm learning that kind of don't fit in, and I became more literalist. I thought, well, I have to stick to the actual points, Sahih Hadith only, like no weak Hadith, nothing like that, because the Salafis have a very like rigid way of like following
Yeah.
Islam, and the Bandis, even though they're pretty strict too, they have some leniency and they follow this thing. And this is another funny thing about Deobandis is, or Tablighi Jamaats, is like they're kind of compared to the Muslim Jehovah Witnesses, as in they try to invite people towards like Islam, but it's not really like people outside of Islam they're inviting people that are already in Islam, like other Muslims, and they go door to door and try to go on these retreats and like
The
try to
Tabligh, you're talking
bring
about
people
Tabligh
back.
Jamaat?
Yeah, Tablighi Jamaat. So
And
that was something very common in our household. Like my brothers would often go there.
And then
My uncle.
once you became Salafi, you were like, oh, this is all haram, this is bid'ah,
Yes.
weak hadith.
Yes. And I started becoming really strict, and I kind of look back and think, oh my gosh, I was so annoying, because I used to be very like pressuring of it, and like I started taking it so much more seriously, and the things I was learning was actually like affecting me. Like, I was mentally like feeling scared of a lot of the things, because I guess in a
Yeah,
way
me
it's kind of
too.
fear based.
Yeah.
Like every little thing is just, it makes you paranoid that this can lead you to hell, that can lead you to hell, anything can lead you to hell. And it's like, and as a woman I was thinking, well, I'm already vulnerable because most women already go to hell.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking I have to try extra hard to be a better Muslim.
Oh wow,
So I tried.
that's crazy. Like that thinking, that when you actually get that thinking inside you. I've never heard a woman say that, Muslim woman, that I have to try extra hard because of the hadith that says that most women are going to hell.
And like at that time I didn't even see it as something like offensive, and how like misogynistic it was, because at the time like feminism, even though I feel like it's always been a core belief in me, I just never really ventured into it. I never really explored it and tried to understand it. For me, it was always something that I thought was like, satanic almost. It's like you're always taught like, women are supposed to be subservient or obedient. And like I thought feminism was the opposite of that. And I had to avoid that. So I never really thought of it as like, men and women need to be equal. They are equal but different, is what I thought. So
and what made you said you were debating with your brother about Salafism. What was convincing you to be Salafi? Your brother?
Not my brother, just the stuff we talked about, like the points he brought up made me really like think a lot, and I was researching more. I'm not really sure what was the main thing.
Was he Salafi? Like, was he pushing you towards that, or you were like
No, he wasn't
counseling?
pushing me at all. He was not pushing. He was just, I feel like actually the thing is with my brother, he was actually kind of outcasted himself for being Salafi, or not being Salafi, or like trying to go down that path.
Yeah.
And just the people he associated with, he was always judged a lot by my family. And I kind of felt for him. I felt like that was not right. Like whatever he wants to believe, he needs to be, free to express it. And we just have these conversations, and then he make me think differently. I was like, wait, you have a point, and the way like he's like, but everyone else in our family had that one belief, so it was hard to kind of go against that. And that was actually a stepping stone, I feel like, to where I've come now, where like seeing my brother, like he was kind of like, not, even though he wasn't an apostate, he was still different from our community, and he was outcasted for that kind of. And
he was willing to challenge the belief system that he grew up in.
Yeah, and like even my father, like he was a bit ignorant about these different views, and he assumed that it was kind of like an extreme sect that was far, away from Islam, kind of like Ahmadis or Shia. Like that's what he thought Salafism was. He didn't realize how similar they actually were to Deobandi Islam, but that was like his assumption. So he even called my brother a murtad. And like I saw firsthand like how my dad would react to something like that. So I kind of got a little bit like scared, even though it wasn't necessarily like violent like it was with me. I was still aggressive with him, and I saw like, wow, like just being different in our family is such a big deal. Like I can never do that. I have to be the same thing they want me to be, or else I'm risking it. And like my brother was really, being a guy, I guess you probably don't have that much fear too, but still like he was being, really kind of brave with standing up for his own like beliefs and stuff. So yeah, even though like I became Salafi eventually, I feel like by going more into it and learning actual stuff like how crazy it is, the hudud punishments, the way.
What are hudud punishments? What do you mean?
So hudud punishments are death penalties in Islam that are
Capital punishment.
justified for certain crimes. Certain crimes like consist of, well, theft, for example, you have to get your hands chopped off, and that's a hudud punishment. I
Okay.
guess some people can survive that. I wouldn't consider that death penalty, but still very, harsh
Yeah.
and cruel. And
Yeah.
then there's also, stoning for adulteries and lashing for zina, and um, just all these different things. And even drinking alcohol, I believe. I'm not 100% sure if I'm right, but I think they said that if you publicly drink alcohol, there's also a hard punishment for that.
Yeah, you can
So
get
this is
beaten with slippers or something like that, according to Oma. I
yeah,
think it's left to the legislator to decide how to deal with you. So it could be
yeah.
lashing or anything. I
So
want to highlight one thing before you move on, because you have a lot to say.
mhm,
But you made a very good point, which I want to just emphasize, which is that when you became Salafi, you were scared that of doing something that was misguided, of something sinful. And this is kind of one of the big problems with Salafism or any sort of Puritanism movement, where you are just like it's self consuming. It's a movement that
mhm,
eats itself alive, because what happens is everything becomes like a field of bid'ah, right? Or like,
mhm.
I'm not, if you're listening to an Ashari, then they're not on the
Oh,
right manhaj, and you can be
yes.
misguided. And then even some of the Salafi preachers themselves are attacked as not being Salafi enough, like Bilal
Mhm.
Phillips. And so, it is actually damaging to a person's self-worth, and a person's puts a lot of guilt on people, this feeling of
Yeah.
always worrying about, am I doing the right thing, am I on the right
Yeah.
path, do I have the right belief even.
Yeah. And I feel like, just to comment on that too, I feel like that was happening to me in the sense that I felt like I was trying so hard to be on the right path, because they said that the hadith about there being 73 or 72. Correct me if I'm wrong, like, sects, and only one of them is going to be right. So even if you are Muslim, at the end of the day, if you're not belonging to the right sect, you can still go to hell. And that thought alone used to terrify me, because I used to think, okay, if I'm Salafi and this is the right path, what about my family who are all Deobandi? What
Yeah.
about my friends who probably aren't even Deobandi? They're probably Barelvi or something else, or Shia. What about all these different sects? Like, are they all really gonna go to hell? And like, oh, what if I'm the one who's wrong? Like, I used to question myself, like, what if they're right or I'm wrong? But even then, like, I just felt paranoid about like everything. I felt paranoid for my own salvation. Like, I wanted to go to heaven. I didn't want to burn in hell. And then I thought about my family and the ones I loved the most. I didn't want them to go to hell. So it was always like I was that person who was really, I don't know what you would call it. Like a haram police, I guess. Like someone who's always
Yeah.
correcting people. And this kind of comes from another teaching in Islam called Amr bil Maruf Nahy al Munkar, where like you're taught that when you see wrong, you have to correct it. Either with your hand, if you can't do it with your hand, then with your tongue, and if you can't do it with your tongue, you have to at least think of it as something bad,
Yeah.
and judge it. Basically, you're taught that you have to judge people. So that's kind of where it came from. Like, I was always constantly trying to correct people and make them go on the right path, only because I thought what I was doing was good, and for them to be on the right. So I always understand when there's always Muslims who are trying to quote unquote guide me, bring me back to Islam, because I get it. I was there. I understand where they're coming from, and oftentimes it does come from a place of love, because you have to think how much they care for you, to want your akhirah to be good, that they want to guide you back. But it's just that they don't understand that at the end of the day, maybe all of this stuff that we are taught is just false.
Yeah.
And
And akhira means hereafter.
yeah, hereafter. I'm
you're,
so
you're
sorry if
half
I keep saying things and I'm
you're
not
half
mentioning
Arab.
what they are.
No, it's good. Just because if you have any non-Muslims listening, I'll just interrupt you if you use an Arabic word that they might not understand. We can just explain it.
Okay, but yeah, so I was Salafi for a bit, and then learning about all these like extreme things, like in the hudud punishment, like I said, and just a lot of stuff regarding women, and just seeing it in my own household too, like how we were being treated. Like, I never really questioned it as much, but I always was not happy, and I saw my unhappiness as like kind of like, just to like clarify, I think Islam is a very depressing religion in itself, and it makes people believe that what they are going through, like their suffering, is somehow like a way for them to get into heaven, right? So the more you suffer, the more patient you are, and the more like dua you make, you're eventually going to go to heaven. So for me, I always justified all the suffering I was going through, that I would eventually get rewarded for it. So I never really thought I needed help. And I think this is I don't even know what to call this, like, condition. It's just you make peace with your suffering, and that's kind of how Islam teaches you to do it. But
Yeah.
they don't really teach you how to handle the problems that are going on. They don't teach you what to actually do about them. They teach you to make dua and just be patient and to continue enduring things but not do anything about it. So it's not a very proactive religion. It's more like an idealistic. Think about the good but don't really do anything about it.
It's almost
So
in a way, I don't know if it's the right word to use, but it's almost a kind of nihilism where everything will be fine when you die, you'll go to paradise. It's not, I mean, Islam, and sometimes Islam does encourage us to fix the wrongs, like you said, nahiya and munkar, but at the same
yeah,
time it does at the same time create the system where you're like, yeah, well, God will deal with it if I don't deal with it, right? So if someone cheated you
yeah,
and someone cheated you out of money, as a Muslim, I would be like, I'm gonna get that guy. No, I'll forgive him. I'll let it go because God will deal with
yeah,
him. And I've heard people as
yeah,
a Muslim tell me that, I was cheated and this person did this to me, and I don't care. God will deal with it, and He's not dealing with it.
yeah.
And by not dealing with it, especially if it's a systemic issue, you're
Mhm,
letting the virus fester, right? The
mhm.
disease continue in the society, and you're not dealing with it. And of course, you should deal with it. Even I think Islam recommends that, but this sort of like hereafter is going to solve everything. It is a sort of nihilism.
Yes, and even Anaya and Munkar, like, that is only extended to what Islam sees as bad. It's not extended to what is generally bad, like domestic violence. A lot of
Yes.
Muslims won't really call it bad. They would just say it is just the husband's right, and
Yeah.
that's another main thing for me that really got me to question my faith the most. I think was what I was believing was you know I seen like my mom being abused in front of by my dad often, and I often used to think my dad was the problem, and in ways he was, but also like there's a lot of stuff enabling him to do what he was doing, and it wasn't being addressed. And when he
What
would
was
do those
what was
things,
ena- what was enabling him?
religion obviously, it
But
was
how
giving him
how
that
does how does
pass.
how does Islam enable marital violence?
Domestic violence. So what
Yeah.
basically happens is, you, in Islam, is permitted to beat women, at least your wife. There's a whole verse in the Quran that says you're allowed to beat your wife, and obviously there's so many different interpretations people come up with. It has to be under this condition, under that condition, under that condition. But from what I understand, like the way I learned Islam,
Yeah.
it wasn't. I didn't learn that version,
The
this
way your
westernized
family
version.
understood it, the way your dad understood it was he's allowed to beat his mom, your mom, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So, and I think this version of you just only do it when it's very necessary and do it with a toothbrush. I think this version was created to appeal to a Western audience, an audience that in whose culture the domestic violence isn't already normalized.
Yeah.
Because in our culture, it's already normalized. In the Arab
Mhm.
culture, it's already normalized. Nobody needs to bring up justifications for it. It's just already known knowledge. Like, people know that people beat their wives. And then Islam just comes up and gives you that, excuse to, like, well, if it must happen, you're allowed to. Your husband has that right. And
Yeah.
there has been, plenty incidents even in recorded in the hadith where men have beaten their wives and the Prophet never said anything about it, to the point they were green and bruised. And even Aisha said that she never seen any woman
Yeah.
suffer more than the believing women. So it's
Yeah.
pretty obvious that, domestic violence is excused and permitted in Islam. It's like, it's given to them as their right. So whenever I questioned it and I told, like, my uncle who was a hafiz, I told him, like, can you please guide him, because my father only listens to his siblings. He doesn't listen to us. So help him understand that what he's doing is wrong. And he just looked at me and said, "What do you mean it's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's his wife. He can do whatever he wants, and you're his daughter. You should stay out of it. You're not allowed to meddle into these businesses." And the
Gee.
thing is, I mean, being her daughter, like, that's my mother at the end of the day. What do you mean I can't meddle into it? I have younger siblings who are scared. I'm scared. Like, I'm told that I have to get married, and that's when my life will begin. And that's I have to depend on a man, and I'm scared myself to get married. If this is what you're telling me that a man is allowed to do, like, why should I put myself in that position?
Wow, that's a
That
good
was
point. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
hmm So, and for a long time, I never really thought about my future like that. I never thought about, having a job, having a career, because I was always taught that I'm just gonna, be a wife, a housewife, and a mother, and just be taken care of by someone else. And for the first time, I think the realization kind of hit me that I really can't rely on anybody. I can't just trust, anybody random to, marry me and take care of me, because I don't know what
Yeah.
they're gonna be like, and I might be in a
Oh.
situation where I need to take care of myself. So that's when the whole thought about being independent kind of came to me. I wanted to study. I wanted to go to university, school, get my bachelor's. I wanted to have a good job and be able to support myself. And if I get married, I wanted to be with someone that I choose and not get arranged to.
Hmm.
These basic
Yeah.
things. I think only a lot of Muslims have these. Not
Yeah.
every Muslim has the situation that I was in. Like mine was so extreme that I didn't have these basic rights. And I've seen so many moderate Muslims in the West who have these freedoms that they don't ever have to even question having them.
Yeah.
For me, I did. So, and it
And
was
these.
tied to religion.
Mhm.
hmm
Sorry, go ahead. It was tied to the religion.
I said it was tied to religion. So, like, I can't say because I've been told this that it's a cultural issue. It's not religion, but it is tied to religion too. At least my version that I was following and what my family were following. Because at the end of the day, you can't excuse a whole version of Islam and call it culture when there's people who mass amount of people who believe in it and follow it.
Yeah.
And they get these ideas from their religion. It's not just stuff they get from their culture. If anything, where my Deobandi Islam is so like anti-culture, and Salafi Islam is even more anti-culture. So
Yeah.
they don't.
It's a very confusing and tricky and complicated topic, the relationship between Islam as a religion and
Mhm,
culture. And when you
mhm.
say anti-culture, I know what you mean. When you say anti-culture, what you mean is, but Salafism is a culture too. It has its own culture, its own
Yes,
like clothing style, like wearing the thobe and
yeah, it's very Arab actually. It's
yes,
not like.
yes, yeah, and so their culture, that Salafi subculture is very anti-culture, meaning like you can't celebrate the local customs and stuff. Unlike Sufism, where the kind of
Mhm,
like I want to say one thing. What you said when you said moderate, you didn't have what many moderate Muslims families have. Like for example, the daughters can go out to the movies or whatever.
mhm,
They can choose who they get married to. You didn't have that, and so I find that sometimes people, they don't understand it. They don't empathize with us because they didn't go
mhm,
through that themselves. They're like, yeah, Islam's
mhm.
fine, and they're like, free. They're like this Western privileged Muslims that some of them are converts to Islam. They wear hijab by choice. Nobody
Yeah,
forced them to wear hijab, and they're like shitting on people that are like, they don't realize, like, a lot of these people, a lot of us, we never had a choice. You never had a choice whether you wanted to wear niqab or hijab.
exactly.
You never had a choice about going to school. You weren't allowed to. You had to be homeschooled.
Mhm,
And so, there needs to be a little bit more understanding, I think, from that side, to realize that not everybody is privileged the way they're privileged, and not everybody
mhm.
is going to have the same situation. And those of us in more religious families, and I'm not including myself, so I'm not saying I suffered under some theocracy in my family. It wasn't like that, but I empathize with people who do, and I understand that this is what many people go through, and you went
Mhm.
through this. So it's important to point that out, that yes, not every Muslim has that, but Muslims should also realize that the more religious you are, the worse off you are, often, most, especially
Yes,
as a woman.
yes. And the more religious is also, according to what is majorly believed to be the closest thing to authentic Islam. The versions of Islam that's followed in the West, even though it's better, I like that kind of version. I think it's more peaceful, but we have to be honest, it's not the closest thing to what real Islam is, or
Yeah,
at
I
least
don't I don't
according to the Quran
really
and these.
yeah, I don't really like saying real Islam, but I do, because I think there's multiple versions of Islam. But
Yeah.
people that are more religious and were following the text more closely, no matter what sect they're in, they tend to be more anti-women, and less freedom
Hmm.
of expression, less freedom of religion, all of
Yeah.
that. Unless we're talking about like a smiley or something. We're not talking about that. We're talking about Sunni Muslims, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And before you
So
continue, I just want to read one comment, which is really nice. Very depressing. My mom thinks Allah tests us with hardships. They think Allah tests us with hardships to test us. The more hard the situation is, the more the sign that Allah loves you. Did you hear this as well? This sort of rhetoric?
yes, and actually, my mom still says this. Like, she, even like, when we started reconnecting later, but she still says this, like, Allah tests those who He loves, and the more He tests you, the more He loves you. And I believe this stuff too. Like, I was really like, accepting my own abuse and my own suffering, and thinking that it was like God's sign of loving us, and didn't realize how psychopathic that is. Kind of like, it's narcissist, if anything. Like, this version of God that we have created in our heads, that He loves us when he punishes us and when He tests us, is a very narcissist God. And I don't understand why so many people want to
Very
praise something like that.
sadistic God, right?
Sadistic, yeah. It's like he gets a kick out of hurting his own creation. So
Yeah, it's weird, right? It's very strange,
mhm,
because why would God have to do this to us? It really does feel like post hoc rationalization, that we're just suffering in
mhm.
this world and we don't know what to say. So we say, yeah, God is testing us. But in reality, we just made up that story to make ourselves feel better.
Yes, that's exactly what religion even is. Like, it's a comforting thing. It's a coping mechanism. And I think for me and a lot of people, like, who've been through what we did, like, in my family, there's been a lot of like trauma. My mom has been through certain things, and I've kind of had to step up and be her support, and be like, not like her therapist, but I've always, obviously, in our families, in our culture, nobody gets therapy. So your daughters, your kids become like, the people you throw everything on. So I
And
became that thing for my mom at a young age, ever since I was homeschooled, and I've seen more. And I
that's
feel
not
like
healthy.
her, yeah, and I feel like seeing her going through what she did made me more religious too, because I started going to religion for comfort, and finding things that will make her feel better and make me feel better. And like, in the end, it was just something that we used to just cope. It was just something we used to survive, because at the end of the day, none of us were happy. We were all miserable. It was so evident that, everyone, all the females, at least in my family, my brothers, I can't even really talk about because they had their own life. But my sister, my mom, and the women in our family, we all were suffering and nobody was happy. But it was just something we rationalized and said it's okay, because God is testing us, and God will be happy. He will reward us for everything. It's
Yeah,
just.
back to that again, that whole thing of
Mhm.
not fixing the problem because God will fix it
Yes.
later, right?
And I tried seeking help. I tried asking, the people in my community to help me. And that's what they have always told me. Like, don't talk about it. Don't say this. Don't shame your father. This is your honor. If you start talking about your father this way, it's gonna dishonor him. And what are people gonna say? So I wasn't allowed to talk about it. I wasn't allowed to tell anybody. And all they told me was, just pray more, read this ayat, read this dua, read this, and I'll pray for you, and everything will be fine. And that's it, and nothing else. And there came a point when my mother was so severely abused that I needed to call an ambulance for her. And I did that. And when I did that, my uncles and my cousins came, and everyone turned the ambulance away. My little brother was like 6 at the time. And they told them that my brother accidentally called and it was all a mistake. And they actually left. And when they left, like, obviously they turned on me and they're like, oh, what kind of traitor are you? A horrible daughter. How could you betray your father? Because obviously when you call the ambulance, the police come with them. And I said, I didn't call the police. That wasn't my intention. I was trying to get help for my mom. And no, they just assumed I called the police, and they just assumed the worst. So you're not really allowed to seek help, like legal help. So
Wow. So
this kind of came
they
into.
didn't, so they, even though she needed medical attention, they didn't take her because the men in the family said, oh, it was a mistake.
Yes, because they didn't want, if they knew that my mom was being abused with my dad, it would cause, issues like that for him and everything. So they didn't want to
Wow.
expose that.
They should
So they
have
just
come
kept her.
inside and checked on everybody.
I know. That's why I don't understand. Like, I'm so
That's
confused
so
about
messed
why they
up.
did that. And I guess it's because of the whole culture. Like, some people think, like, it's culture insensitive, and they don't want to disrupt these things, and that's kind of how a lot of the funds here are. I mean, that happened to me when I was thinking about leaving eventually. Like, this eventually came into play later, because when I was leaving, I couldn't even call the police before I left. I had to know that I was going to leave the house and then call the police, because if I did it while I was still in the house,
Oh, wow.
I risked that whole thing happening again, where my family just turned them away and I don't get to get out. So I couldn't do that. But yeah, that's how it is here, and that's how my family worked. And this is the stuff that really got me, like, confused and making me like doubt everything. And even then, like, when I was doubting, it was mostly like my own like feelings about it. Like, I didn't like what I was learning. I didn't like what Islam was teaching me, but I couldn't prove it was wrong. I couldn't prove that the religion itself was false. I could only prove that I didn't like some of the things that it was teaching. But how am I supposed to judge a religion if it's right or not just because I don't like some things about it? So I wasn't a full full blown ex-Muslim that it took me a long time, like a couple years of just doubting and like searching to really be convinced that it
And
was wrong.
Ali Dawa and these guys say, "Oh, you guys leave Islam because you don't like Islam," but you're showing right here that you didn't like some things, but you stuck with it. You stuck with Islam.
Yes,
And eventually, you
I
found your way to it, but that didn't stop you from being a Muslim. A lot of Muslims have doubts. A
yeah.
lot of Muslims don't like. I remember my wife; she didn't like a lot of things, and I would be the one that would be like trying to convince her. No, no, no. Islam makes
Mm-hmm.
sense because insert apologist nonsense, blah 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 blah, and she'd be like, I don't know. It still doesn't make sense, but okay. So I think
Yeah.
we convince ourselves because we're like, yeah, we have to, right?
And I didn't want to leave it either. Like I was just thinking, this religion has been my whole life. It's been there for me through everything. It's like that crutch I've always had, and I need it, and I can't just let go of it because I'm not ready to walk yet. So I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, how am I gonna let go of this? I hope and pray that whatever I was thinking was wrong, and that I found some kind of like reassurance and guidance and like realized that what the hidden meaning behind everything was, despite me not being happy with it. Like I tried to justify why is it okay for a man to beat his wife, and it just never made sense. I just thought, like, how can I justify it? How can anyone justify hitting and beating a grown woman, a grown equal? It's just, but I tried. I really did try. I didn't want to believe that it was wrong, and I stuck with the religion for the longest I could until I finally realized, watching a lot. I used to watch what's his name, Apostate Prophet and Masked Arab during the beginning of my ex-Muslim journey, like
Doubting?
when I was really
Yeah.
when I was really like serious about questioning everything. And Masked Arabs, like his attention to detail and everything he was saying, and the fact that I knew everything he was saying was authentic because I studied it myself, so I couldn't even question it.
Yeah.
It really opened my eyes, and I realized, there is no logical reason to believe in Islam. There is no rational. It doesn't make sense. It's just false. And all the stuff that I felt was wrong, like my gut telling me that it was wrong, I was right, to feel that way, and there was nothing wrong for me to feel that way. So just I think when I was about 21, I think is when I finally came to terms with leaving it. But even then, I was still Muslim. I was still living with my family. I was still under all the same obligations as before. I didn't leave the house, wasn't working, wasn't allowed to go to school, and all that same stuff. And I was expected to get married, and the marriage thing constantly came up, and I constantly fought it, and would be abused if I refused. So it was kind of like there was no end out of it. Like I didn't know how to get out without getting married. That was like my
Yeah.
only escape I could think of. But I just kept tolerating it for a long time. I just kept pretending to be someone I wasn't until I realized, you know what, I don't want to pretend anymore. And I didn't do this in a way like to announce my apostasy. I didn't tell anybody anything about what I was, feeling. I thought, you know what, there's so many Muslims out there who don't pray. There's so many Muslims who don't wear hijab. There's so many, Muslim. You can be Muslim and still not follow the religion 100%. And if their families are okay with it, society is okay with it. Why can't I? They be okay with me if I want to do that. So I had this assumption that me like slowly not being religious, me slowly giving up certain practices, would help them come to like accepting me and allowing me to do what I wanted, but still having that relationship with them. And I didn't realize how wrong I was gonna be. I didn't realize how extreme they'd come off by doing this. But I tried. Basically, I stopped praying, and that was the only thing I did first. And it was the first thing I did, and it was the only thing I did when I first stopped being practicing. Is stop praying. And you know how in Muslims pray, they don't pray like Christians and Jews. It's like it's not a personal thing. It's an actual like act of praying where they do a
Yeah.
whole
With the
ritual.
family and everything, right?
Yes. So it wasn't something I could hide, really. It was, it became clear that I wasn't praying, and they questioned me on it, and I just said, I'm not. I don't want to. And at first I tried making it like an excuse, like, oh, I'm on my, monthly cycle or something.
Yeah.
It's only so far you can go with that, because there's rulings on that too, and it can't be more than 10 or 15 days or so. And so it just doesn't add up then. So they
Yeah.
realized, okay, I'm not praying. Something's wrong. And he kept on questioning me. It was mainly my father kept on questioning. My mom was begging me to just, like, she didn't care, I think, about whether I was praying or not. She only cared that if I didn't, then I was gonna get hurt. And she was begging me that, please don't do this. You're gonna regret it. Like, don't, please just pray. Even if you don't want to, just force yourself,
Yeah.
because she didn't want to deal with what's gonna happen. And I didn't. I kept refusing.
Yeah.
And by doing that, my father, he lost it. He dragged me out of my bed. He pulled my hair. He started beating me and pinning me down and strangling me and saying, "Are you gonna pray or not? Are you gonna pray or not?" And I was like, "No, no, no, leave me." And he basically, he yelled at this point, saying that if you don't pray, you're not a Muslim, you're a murtad, and you know what happens to murtads. And I was shocked, and I didn't know how to process that, because I never ever thought, I knew that about the hudud punishment. I learned about these things, and I knew
Yeah.
that this stuff happens only in Muslim countries, or
Yeah.
maybe in certain countries where, people take the law in their own hands. But this is America, I never thought my own father would do something like that, even attempt something like that. Even if he didn't succeed, the fact that, that was on his mind, that he knew that what his religion was teaching, like he knew that the punishment for apostasy is death, and he tried
Yeah.
actually implementing that with his own hands. And I know some people will say, well, he was wrong for doing that because that's a state thing, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Like, a human life was threatened that day,
Yeah.
and they continue to be threatened all around the world where these laws take place.
Yeah.
So it just gave me a huge insight on what it's actually like to be an ex-Muslim in such communities, where
Yeah.
you actually do feel like your life is threatened. I just knew at that point I'm not gonna be one of those people who just leave Islam and, like, continue my life. That's just not how it's gonna be. Like, my situation is so different now. I
Yeah.
have to speak up. I have to say something about what's going on, because people need to know what's going on. What if there's other people, like, experiencing this and they don't have the strength to talk about it, and
Yeah.
nobody knows? So around this time, obviously after that, like, I managed to get out of that situation. My brothers came, it was a whole thing. My oldest brother accused me of, like, provoking my father and saying, oh, I should have just prayed and I just listened to him and I wouldn't have gotten hurt. So it was my fault. So, and then my sister-in-law, who's also, she's a convert, and she was very sweet. She was actually very helpful during that time, but she wasn't very, like, she didn't really have many suggestions on what I should do to, after that. Like, was I supposed to stay there? Should I have done something else? Because after that incident, living in that house was horror. I've never felt safe again. I've constantly been feeling at edge that something's gonna happen again. Like, one slip up and he's gonna attack me again. And I was on my best. I tried to be on my absolute best behavior whenever I was around them, and just pretending to save myself. But I was constantly, like, suffering, and I hated it. It was deteriorating my mental health. And at that time, I had opened up a Twitter, and I started talking about what I was going through, and that was the first time I kind of started expressing it. I started following other ex-Muslims. I started following all these other YouTubers and everything, and just really started getting engaged in this community. And I kind of felt like I had a new home. Even though I was suffering in my own home, I had another home I could turn to, where I could be myself. So it was during this time that I realized that I wasn't safe in my home, and I was considering either running away or getting married, or worst comes to worst, my final. Even though this isn't even an option, it shouldn't be an option for anybody. But I was thinking about taking my life if
Yeah.
it wasn't gonna get any better. It was at that point. So either run away to get married or that. So I really didn't know what else to do, and I thought if I got married, would that fix anything? Would that really fix anything? And my sister-in-law even suggested this. Like, she told me either pack your shit or go or get married. So I did the other option. I packed my stuff and left.
Wow. Where did you
And
go?
so the way this kind of happened was, I tried, like I said, I couldn't call the police, right? I had to leave the house in order to do that because I didn't want to be in a situation like I was before. So I didn't call the police, but I did try seeking help. I did try getting into XMNA, but at that time I wasn't fully in there. I wasn't in the support circle yet because they were still screening me, and it used to take a very long time to get through the screening process at the time. So I wasn't in XMNA to get the help I needed from there yet. But I was desperate, so I needed help other ways. So while I was open, while I made my Twitter and I became, like, a little more popular, I had more people offering me help. And first, I tried helping myself. I tried calling like shelters. I tried calling women's centers to see what I could do, and they told me that there was nothing they could help me with because my case wasn't considered domestic violence. They said that I had parental abuse and not partner abuse, and that they don't help people in those situations. So I couldn't even get help like that locally. So I started trying to seek help from people I was meeting online. And there was one individual who stuck out, who was sharing a lot about themselves, telling me they were affiliated with certain organizations that help women and children and people in my situations, and they could do something to help me, and they were serious about it. And I feel I was very naive for trusting them, but I really was desperate and I had no other option. So I took their help. I left in the middle of the night. I took whatever I could, all my important documents, and nothing else really. I didn't have many clothes to take. I just took a few things just that I could fit in one backpack. That night was the hardest and most intense night of my life. I never ever stepped out of the house by myself before, and for the first time, I'm stepping out, and obviously at nighttime, but like that too was scary. And then going to meet someone I don't know. But I was thinking, the only other option I have is marriage or death. Like, and there's nothing else I could do to get out because no resources are helping me, and I can't get out. Like, I don't know my way out of here. I've never been out here. I'm not familiar with anything. I can barely. Another issue that I have that is, I have a visual disability. I can barely see anything. I can't really. I don't even know how to take a bus. Like, I didn't learn any of this stuff. Like, my family sheltered me so much. So what else can I do? And there's someone who's offering me help, and for me, I just took that chance. I thought maybe this is gonna be my chance at freedom. So I
Wow.
went with them.
Hmm.
And for the first, honestly, what I can say is like I wasn't. It was better than I was expecting. I didn't like. I feel like they really did help me like, build a trust with them. I was trusting them. I was comfortable with them after a while, even though it was super hard. But there was still a catch to it. They were taking care of me. They were keeping a roof over my head, feeding me, letting me stay with them, and providing me with some support while I was there, even though I had nothing. So in return, I still had to like pay back certain things for them. So I became an assistant. I started working for them. I started cleaning and doing all these things for them in exchange for what they did to me for me. So I didn't really see anything wrong with that. First, I was thinking, well, I have to give back. They did so much for me. They tried to help me, so I'm indebted. I owe them. That's how I was thinking of it. And after a couple months, some other things went on, and too much to totally talk about. But I didn't feel like I could stay there, and I tried leaving. And bear in mind, this is a completely new location. This is not where I am originally from. They took me somewhere else, like outside of the state. And
Yeah.
I didn't know anyone or anything about where I was. So I was confused, and I once again took my stuff and left just like that. And it was cold, it was snowing, and I basically ended up in the hospital who asked me a couple questions, and I told them everything. And they basically told me that I was trafficked.
Oh wow.
And I was in denial. I didn't believe it. I was in shock because I didn't think someone like that could do anything like that.
Hmm.
And they said, well, no, they've done stuff like this with other people too, and they have a history of it. And, you know, you might not feel it, but it is what it is. And I had trouble, like, processing that information. I had trouble accepting that. And there's like some other stuff that they said that really proved some things to me that I don't want to say publicly yet, but I just knew that what they were saying was right. And I had to come to terms with that. And at that point, I was stuck over there, and I didn't want to stay there anymore. I wanted to just go back to something that was more familiar. So I told them, like, how can I get back? I want to go back to, my original state. And they arranged everything, and they sent me back. When I went back, at that time I was connected with XMNA finally. So XMNA, stepped up for me and they helped me through that time. I was homeless for 2 months at that time. I didn't have anything. I didn't have any money. They were the ones who suggested opening a GoFundMe to help, with my living expenses. So I did that. And basically for the first 2 months or so, when I came back, I was just, really struggling. I found a job. I was working, but it was just really, really difficult to get back on my feet when I had nothing, And this time I felt like this was the really, really the test of me leaving. Like the first time I had someone else kind of, doing everything for me, and this is the first time I was doing it all on my own completely. So it was hard and it wasn't easy, but eventually I got into a shelter and I stayed there for a couple months. They helped me a lot too. They gave me a lot of information and resources that helped me get on my feet. I have a job now. I have 2 jobs now actually, and I'm studying, not college, but I do take classes, and I'm starting to do the things that I've always wanted to do when I first left. The main reason why I left, just to live my life, and things right now are actually better. They're not 100% great, but it's a process, and I feel like not many ex-Muslims when I talk about the difficult parts about leaving. A lot of us want to focus on the amazing things, like, oh yes, I can dress however I want, and I do, and that's good. We could focus on that, but we should also be aware that it's not easy, because I had this sense that when I first left, everything was just gonna go by smoothly and everything was just gonna be perfect, and after all those years of suffering back home with my family and being Muslim, I was finally gonna be at peace, finally gonna find my life. And it wasn't exactly like that. It didn't happen right away, you know. And I had to go through a lot to come to where I am now. But things are gradually getting back up, and my life now is still 100 times better than my life was back home.
Mhm.
And I can assure that because I still see the same patterns back home that I used to see. Things are slightly different now, like for my sister, and
Mhm.
there's a little bit more like leniency now. She's allowed to study. They said she
Because
could
of
work,
you?
but she's not really working.
Because you left?
Yeah, because of me, like they realized, how restricted they were being. But even then, it was still like limited. It's good for me. I feel like because it's never been that lenient before. They've just always been so crazy restricted that even the slightest bit of change means like the world. But it's still not enough. It's still not enough for me to think that I can go back to that life. So
Yeah, the process of leaving your family is not an easy one. And I remember actually speaking to you when you were at the point where you were contemplating, should I just get married? Is this a way out?
yeah.
And what I was thinking at the time was that marriage just complicates things. It doesn't make things better. If you're getting married to someone that you don't necessarily love, and then on top of that you're a Muslim woman, and on top of that your culture
Mhm.
is so misogynistic, and the family, and who knows like what'll happen with your new husband and all that. So my advice was don't do it, because I remember this other girl by the name of Zara. I forgot her last name now. She wrote an article on
Mhm.
Medium, a really long article where she talked about how her parents were going to make her marry her cousin. And for her, that was a
Mhm.
breaking point. She's like, that's it, I'm leaving. And she left. And I wanted to ask you, like, so you kind of answered already, but you were saying, despite all that you went through, you're still better off now where you are, even as sequestered as you were, and as you were kept away from the real world, you weren't allowed to study. You're an adult now, you're in your 20s, and you didn't have any of the stuff that most people just take for granted. Are you still, with all that, you're better off now, would you say?
Yes, I still think so, because and that says a lot. I think if for me to say that
Yeah,
after all of that,
yeah,
all that help for the past year of trying to be free and now being where I am now, living in a shelter, that still is better than how I was treated back home.
yeah.
That's still better than living under that religion. Like I had no life. My life had no meaning. I felt like the only meaning it has was to please a God and go to heaven, but that was it. I didn't have any goals. I didn't have any ambitions. I felt like I nothing I did mattered, because at the end I'm just gonna be a housewife, just have kids. That's all my life purpose was. And now I don't see that. I see so much potential. I have so many possibilities. I can, going through what I had gone through, like, it made me, I was questioning what I wanted to do as my career, since I never really thought about it before. And experiencing all this has made me realize that I want to work as a social worker.
Oh,
I want to
wow.
work
Yeah.
in, these type of environments that help people who are homeless, or, women who are escaping domestic violence or trafficking or anything. And the way, people from our culture are viewed, and how nobody really understands our circumstances. Like, I want to be the kind of person who give those people support when I didn't have it myself, because I was denied help when I asked for,
Mhm.
the first time when I was leaving, that will anybody help me? They said no. So
Oh.
I feel like it taught me a lot. It made me learn a lot. For most people, these lessons they learn throughout their life. They constantly go through different experiences to learn new things. And I feel like for me, because I was so sheltered and like my life was just set on pause for such a long time, I kind of had to learn a lot in such a short time. But all the intenseness is like past me now. I feel like now it's just a matter of where do I go from here, and like how can I continue to improve my life. And
Mhm.
another thing is also, my safety. How much do I feel like I'm gonna be safe living the life I want to live. And it's still something that bothers me. I still think about it often, because even though for me, like with my immediate family, my siblings and my parents, I have tried to mend things with them. I have tried to build a relationship with them, and I don't think they would do anything to harm me. But I do fear the community they belong to, and I fear my extended family members. From
Mhm.
like, I just don't understand what they're capable of, you
Mhm.
know. So it's just a matter of like being at peace with everything. I don't want to feel threatened anymore, and I don't want to feel like I'm not safe.
Yeah.
And I felt like that most of my life at home, but now I don't. The only fear I have is if they find me and someone does something to me. That's the
Oh.
only fear that lingers. But other than that, I don't feel like, being in my own house. I don't feel, just because I'm not praying, I'm gonna get beaten to death, or strangled to death. I don't feel like, I have to dress a certain way to be respected by people, and I don't have to, do certain things just to gain basic, human rights. So for me, it was worth it. I still believe my life is so much better than it was ever was before, but it came at a cost, and I had to pay that price, I guess, even though I don't think I deserved to. But for many, it's not easy. It's just you have to weigh out your options and see if you're willing to, go through that. And I feel like that's kind of why I really want to continue talking about, ex-Muslim issues, because I don't want this struggle to be normalized. I don't want this to be, the only way ex-Muslims can be safe. That they have to go through all of these dramatic changes just so they can have the life they want. They shouldn't have to go through that. But we make
Yeah.
it so normalized. If by not talking about it, by not addressing these issues, we're just silencing those voices, and they continue to suffer. And they have to take these extreme measures just to be safe, because nobody else is going to hear them. So that's why I think it's important that, whoever can speak out, they can. And for me too, like, I would love to live without, having to repeat my life story. I would love to like have to live without having to explain where I come from. But in the end,
Yeah.
it's become a part of me. It's my life story. It's my identity. It's shaped me into becoming who I am now. And it's important to, keep on talking about it. And it doesn't mean like, I'm trying to get attention or anything. It's just my way of showing how this stuff happens,
Yeah.
and it's real, and it's not just us and this others. And I've had, because of my, Twitter profile, I've had people in the closet coming to me and telling me that, I'm giving them the voice. I'm being their voice because they can't talk, and that just puts, even though it's really overwhelming, because I feel like that's a big, responsibility, but it's also an honor to be able to like be that voice, even though I'm not necessarily, 100% there yet. I can still empathize and like, amplify those voices who are still struggling.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's so what you're saying is that, because of what you went through and because of the life you lived, and you want other people to be aware of just how bad it can get even in America. And
Mm-hmm.
the fact is that if you didn't have to, you wouldn't be going and telling your story over and over again. But you are doing this to raise awareness to something that's very important. And you were saying we don't want to normalize the struggle. I think what you mean is we want to normalize dissent. That's how we usually put it. We want
Yeah.
dissent, apostasy, questioning, irreligiosity, agnosticism. Like people don't want to believe, they want to believe. We want it to be normalized. We want it so that
Yes.
whoever wants to disbelieve, or if a woman doesn't want to wear hijab, it's just fine. I mean, this is America, right? And then why are people being held to these like foreign standards that don't even, I mean, it's okay for a father to want his daughter to wear hijab, but it's not okay for him to harm her if she doesn't. It's not okay for him to strangle her if she doesn't pray. It's not okay at all, right? I don't know whether it's even okay Islamically or not, but it's definitely not okay, period. Whether or not it's Islamically okay. We don't even care about whether it's Islamically okay. It's breaking the law. It's against basic human decency to do that to anyone, to especially your own daughter. And sometimes I don't know, I cannot imagine this mindset. I just can't. Every time I hear stories like this, it just breaks my heart, because I have a daughter and I just can't imagine like harming my daughter. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, we've evolved to protect our children, because
Yes.
if we didn't protect our children, we wouldn't exist, because our children are us. And the reason humanity got to where it is today is because we care about our offspring, right? And the ones that didn't, they're gone, because they didn't care about the offspring, because the DNA wasn't passed on. I mean, that's a very like materialistic way to look at it, but just, from my perspective, I love my daughter, I love my sons, but especially there's something different about having a daughter. It's not the same, right? And I can't explain it. Dads know that the daughter, the relationship with your daughter is different, right? And my daughter's over here just sitting here like playing video games, and it's special, right? You care for her, you want to protect her. And this religion, like, how, and these cultural values, how is it that it twists and perverts people's humanity so badly that you can
This is something, sorry to interrupt you, but this is something I always thought about too, because even my father, I feel like he wasn't that bad of a person until like a certain point in his life. And he has like certain things that he was experiencing like due to his health and stuff too. But I just always saw him like someone who's a victim too of what his own culture and his own religion. And obviously, it doesn't excuse what he did too. He's responsible for his own actions, and I say that. But I do feel like religion, it corrupts people so much. Like, you have to understand where, like, I know it's not easy to understand, but I kind of can try to get it by understanding, like, when I was a Muslim, how scared I was, and how scared I was for everybody else, that I was trying to be so controlling and trying to push them to be on the right path, because I didn't want to see them go to hell. And to think of it that way, maybe my father thought of this like either in a way to control me, that could be, but also maybe he was scared that his daughter was going down the wrong path and she would end up going to hell. And because maybe he loved me too much, he didn't want to see that. So instead, by giving me the hudud, he thought, like, they say that when you get the hudud, your sin is cleansed, right? And you go to heaven. Is kind of what I get. Even though I don't understand that, because how do you kill someone who's still, who's in the state of apostasy, and like, aren't they gonna go straight to hell? But
and you weren't in a state of apostasy, because you were not praying doesn't make you an apostate, except by a minority opinion. The majority of the four madhabs say that someone who doesn't pray is a sinful Muslim, and it's the more extreme opinion. I forget which scholars said it, is maybe Ibn Taymiyyah, that if you don't pray, and if you've like given up and abandoned the prayer, like officially, that, but they, as your parent, you can still make an excuse for your kids and say that they're just lazy or something. You don't have to take the extreme opinion that she's a murtad. I mean, most of my Muslim family doesn't pray. 99%, well, 99%, I don't know, 99%, but like whatever, 60, 70, 80% of them, they never pray. They pray Jummah. Well, they don't even pray Jummah. They pray Eid. So like, they're not kafir. They don't consider themselves kafir. They consider themselves Muslim.
Exactly.
But
even so many members in my own family, like, they're such hypocrites. They do all these haram things and they don't even care. Like, and thinking about the things they've done, like, they could literally get the hudud themselves if they were in a Muslim country. But they get away with it here.
Go ahead, sorry.
I said they get away with it here because that those laws aren't here. But when it comes to these things, like, not praying, they think they can take the law in their own hand and still implement it when they themselves
Oh, is
you
that how
know.
they're thinking? Yeah, because there's no hudud that's allowed by, as far as I know, like you cannot take the hudud in your own hands. That has to be a
Yeah.
trial. Like if someone's an apostate, you have to take them to the qadi or the qazi,
Mhm.
and then qadi will make a judgment based on, probably he'll give you 3 days to repent. I don't know, there's some rule like that.
Yes.
If they decide
Yes.
that you can't just kill someone because you think they're an
Yeah.
apostate in a non-Muslim country. That's completely wrong and it's against the law.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's against Islamic law too, anyways. But
Yeah. But even
whether or
so,
not,
I
again,
still.
it doesn't matter. Huh?
Yeah, I feel like this was an eye-opening experience for me as well, just to think that regardless, like, I do get, like, Islamically it probably wouldn't have been permitted, and I do think he probably did something wrong
Yeah.
there, but still the fact of the matter was that, they're still trying to kill somebody.
Yeah.
Even the qazi is still, why is the jurisdiction in his hand? Like, why is the judgment in his hand that if someone should live or not,
Yeah.
just for their beliefs and stuff.
Yeah.
That's one of those experiences that really kind of struck me. I realized that, wow, this whole ex-Muslim thing, like, is actually much more serious than even I expected. Like, it's really that big, and nobody's safe for any reason. Like, I never expected that to happen to me, and it still did. So
Yeah.
just to think
Crazy, eh?
what could be going on. Yeah.
And calisthenics Wade, where is he now? He made a good point that oh, here it is. I'm so glad she managed to get out of that trafficking situation. It's also a big lesson for ex-Muslims to learn. Only get help from legit organizations. That's a really good point. And that's one of the reasons why I appreciate EXM&A so much. I'm sorry that wasn't there for you at the point where you needed it, and eventually you were able to get into it. But we need to support ex-Muslim organizations because of
Yes.
what you went through, and I can't, like, a lot of people, I'm sorry to say, a lot of people contact me and I don't have any help to provide them because I'm just a YouTuber. I don't have an organization. I mean, I have EXM&A. I mean, like I urge people to contact organizations like that, but EXM&A was able to save, Mahad Oled, who was basically kidnapped. He was sent to Somalia. I mean, it wasn't kidnapped, but they tricked him. They said we're going for a vacation, but when they got to Kenya, they're like, okay, now we're gonna beat the hell out of you, and we're gonna make you not gay, and we're gonna make you Muslim again. And so at that point, he contacted EXM&A, and they helped contact the embassy, and the American embassy, got him back to America. And that was the end of his relationship with his family. But we need organizations, because I'm like, me, a apostate prophet, like all we're doing is we're talking, and I can't help someone that needs, to get out of Iraq or something. Like, what am I don't have those connections. People ask me, how do you get into Canada? I don't know anything about that stuff.
Exactly.
Right? So
and the same thing happens with me too. I get all these, like, messages about people telling me how I got out and how I did it, and, like, I feel so bad that, like, how do I tell you, like, I don't want you to take the steps I took, because it's not easy. And I always do say, XMNA and these organizations are there, but this is why it's so important that we need to have more, like, support for these organizations. We always hear stuff like, ex-Muslims are a freaking $1 million industry or whatever, they ask for money, and they don't realize, like, this money and all this, support is going to a good cause. It's actual people who need this help, and they benefit from it. It's not just ex-Muslims sitting down and asking for money and not doing anything. They actually are. They're active, and there's not that many people in the XMNA itself too to actually help that much. So just the fact that with the little people in there and the amount of support I still got, it still speaks a lot of how, like,
so you did get support from EXM&A? I thought you didn't.
The second time, when I was homeless.
What did they do? Like, what was it? They gave you advice on what to do? They contacted people? What did they do exactly?
Yeah, so basically there were some members in XMNA living in the area, because I didn't have anywhere to be, right? I didn't have a single
your mic is scratching again.
Sorry. So basically, some members of XMNA, they offered me, transportation. They offered me a place to stay with them from time to time. Like, I stayed with one person, then I left, and I stayed with another. Whoever could basically offer me that until
this was organized through the leadership of EXM&A.
It
Or
was
was
just
it
for
like ad
members.
hoc people, like you posted in a support group and they helped you that way or something?
Yes, I posted in a support group. I mentioned what I was going through, and like many
Oh.
people commented. People reached out. They said like set up a
Oh,
GoFundMe. We're
the
gonna
local
donate.
chapter, for the local chapter.
Yes, the local
Oh,
chapter.
that's
Yeah,
why I
that's
didn't
what they
see it.
did.
Okay. Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay, I understand. So you got help from fellow members. Okay, that's amazing. I didn't know
Hmm.
that part of your story.
Yeah, and I feel like if I was still in XMA before I left, things could have gone much more smoothly. But
Mm,
unfortunately, things just had to be the way it was, and I don't blame anything like that because I know our communities and our organizations are so like they're serious. When it comes to screening, like they have to take their time with it. They have to make sure that people are genuine because there's people's safety and protection on the line. Nobody wants to reveal their identity. Some people are still in the closet in XMNA and they don't want some person coming in who might be a spy, who might not be genuine. So
yeah.
I appreciate that, their screening is something they take
Yeah.
seriously,
So
take the time with it.
yeah.
So
I
yeah.
want to say that I'm amazed. I'm completely amazed. And I mean, I think the same way as you, but I'm amazed to hear that despite what your dad did to you, you still have empathy for him and you're still seeing him as someone that is a product of his environment, his upbringing, and his genes. And I'm amazed
Hmm.
that you're saying that despite the fact that he physically harmed you. But I mean, obviously, I see people the same way, and I see people as being a product of the upbringing. And I always say that about my dad too. I mean, my dad, he grew up in a certain environment. His parents weren't there, and he was raised by his uncle, and he ended up
Hmm.
having alcohol issues and smoking issues, and I totally had like so much empathy for him because I realized that the dude just didn't have a good upbringing, and
Yeah.
I'm lucky I didn't get that. I got a good upbringing and he didn't. And, it's not fair for
Yeah.
me to judge him and to say you're such a bad guy because you drink too much, whereas it's not his
Hmm.
fault. Like I don't, like I
Yes.
don't even believe in free will. I think that all of us are the products of our genes, experiences
Yes.
in life. Basically, those two things, right?
Yes.
DNA and and the experiences we have, and we're like machines
Yes.
that you put us through the world, and you subject us to certain pressures, and we adapt and we grow towards those things. So if
Hmm.
you created me again and you put me in the same situation, I would do the same thing because that's what my programming told me to do, right? So
Yeah.
but it's amazing that you have that empathy still. And so you were saying that you still talk to them, your family, kind of.
Well, I mean, in the beginning when I left, the first couple months, I think it was 8 months in since I left. Before that, I had no contact with them. The only way I left an open way of communication was through this encrypted email.
Oh
So
yeah.
once in a while, they'd send me an email and I respond just to let them know I'm okay. But other than that, we didn't call, no messaging, no
Oh.
video calling, no
Oh
nothing.
wow. You
Um,
do that for your own privacy?
yes, for my own privacy. I was just really scared, honestly. Like I didn't want to be tracked or followed, or for anything to happen. And I also did, when I left, like I did file a police report. I had it written all out. I just sent it when I left. So what happened was the law enforcement did come and they did check on my family because I wanted to make sure that nothing happened as a response for what I did because maybe my dad might get
Oh
angry and do something and lash out on them.
yeah.
So um yeah, they came and I did say I don't want to press charges. I just wanted him to, know that he can't do what he might normally do, and be
Oh,
warned about it. So they did that, and since then, from what I've heard from my family, they said that he doesn't get abusive anymore. He doesn't beat anymore, and he's getting weaker now too physically. So there's not much he can do,
yeah.
anyways. But either way, like he is like more cautious of that and doesn't, he still gets angry, he still yells, but he doesn't do any physical harm anymore, which is a big, step towards the right direction. Since that was my biggest fear when I was living with him, I felt like any moment he was gonna kill me or something.
Oh wow.
So to know
That.
that,
Yeah, go ahead.
mm-hmm,
Sorry.
I said just to know that he's changing somewhat, like that gives me a little bit more comfort.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I had another lady. I don't remember what country she's in. I think she was America, and she kind of said the same thing as you, that a young woman that her father or her family, brothers or whatever, are abusive, and she's scared they're gonna hurt her, whatever. And I'm like, call the police. Maybe that's one possibility. And it just shows you that, like, if you do get the police involved, in many cases, it does help the situation, because then it kind of makes
Mm-hmm.
them step back and they realize that they're not going to get away with it. Unfortunately, it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it just makes the situation worse. But in
Yeah.
many cases, I would guess, and I don't have stats to prove this, but I would guess a police officer, law enforcement actually coming to your house and telling, the people there, don't do this again, I'm pretty sure that would stop most people. And I'm pretty sure that in their
Yeah.
mind, they feel like the god until this happens, and
Yeah.
then they suddenly become a mouse, right?
And you know what the main issue I feel like it is that keeps women from calling for help? Because for me as a daughter, like I knew, like, I could still do it, but for my mother, for example, and people like my mother, I feel like there's this fear that people like my father, especially, put in them, that if you dare to try to get help, then I'm gonna leave you or I'm gonna divorce you.
Oh,
And they don't want to, there's so much stigma around divorced women anyways. And then people like my mother, who doesn't have much, she doesn't have a family, she's not educated, she can't really take care of herself like that. And so it's a big fear for her that even though her husband is, abusive, he's still fulfilling his responsibilities as a husband and a father. So they will take that anyways, instead of calling the police for help or anything. Mhm.
interesting. I see. So that wouldn't apply to the daughter, though, because the daughter can still get away with calling. And
Yeah, but
the
even
I
as a daughter, I feel like there was always that thing. When me and my mom would tell me, like, try not to do that, because think about me. What he's gonna get mad at me? He's gonna say I did this. I made you do it. Like, he's gonna basically blame her. So for me, it was hard for me to even reach out to, because I felt like if I did, then what if he blames my mom and then she gets divorced and then she gets, things happen and it's just more trauma. So
Oh,
for a
yeah.
lot of us, even then, it's we had to. That's why I did when I left. I didn't do it when I was in the house, and I did leave a whole letter explaining everything, why I did what I did, and they all read it and they still are in denial of like everything I said in there, like I said very clearly why I left, and they still think it's just like little things that happen and nothing serious. So
Wow.
mhm.
So this has been a great conversation. And for those of you, just to interject for a minute, those of you who are new here on this channel, please do subscribe. I do need to have a backup channel in case things happen where I'm not able to upload to my main channel. So this is why I'm using this channel for now. Looking forward to going back to the main channel and getting that up to 100,000 subs. I'm at 54,000. And if you can consider supporting me on Patreon, that would be appreciated as well. The link is below to join. And now, is there anything you want to share? Any advice? I mean, you've told your story. Any advice you have to young ladies that are having doubts or have left Islam in your situation? Like you said, people DM you. Is there anything you want to tell them, like in general, just anyone that's listening?
Just a few pieces of advice would be, if you're still stuck in those situations and you're going through doubts first, then don't be afraid. Don't feel like you can't venture into that, because it's very normal and it's only human to do these things. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person for having doubts. And if you do leave Islam and you're still in a situation where you're not comfortable, assess the situation, weigh out what your options are, see if you can still continue living there without having to take drastic measures. But if it comes down to it and you don't feel safe, first things first would be to call the police if you can, and or go to the police yourself if you can, and explain the situation. Usually that does help. If you don't have to press charges, you don't have to make things harder. And if not, then seek out your local resources, your shelters, anything that can help you. If you have friends who can help you, and if nothing else, there's always and this is for people who are living obviously in the West, like there's those organizations, there's Council of Ex-Muslim, and there's Ex-Muslim North America in the US. So there are some organizations there, and I feel really bad that I can't say much for those people who are in Muslim countries, because I don't have that kind of experience and knowledge to
Hmm.
know.
Yeah.
But I just want to say, keep persevering, keep fighting, and you're not alone. There's so many people that are also experiencing that, and hopefully we can normalize this. Hopefully this will become something that won't be so difficult to practice, and maybe with time, you know there will be easier options for people living in Muslim countries. Maybe they can, I don't know, migrate or something, because I really wish that I could help them more, but I really don't know. But other
Do
than
you get
that,
a
do
lot of?
not take advice from people online though. Like if
Mhm.
you don't trust them, do
Yeah.
not do that.
How do you know who to trust when people are like offering you help?
Honestly, that's the biggest problem I have now. I don't know who to trust. Even when I was homeless and living in the shelter, there was resources like trying to help me, and I was so hesitant. I was like, "Are you guys really a resource? Are you guys really like who you say you are?" Because
Yeah.
honestly, like what I the experience I had, I was so shocked that this person wasn't who they said they were, and really tricked me that way and deceived me. So I still have those trust issues, but honestly, it takes time, and they have to gain your trust, and you can't feel like you owe them anything for what they do to you. That's a
Yeah.
big thing. If you ever feel like you owe something to someone because they helped you, then they're not really trying to
Not
help
really
you, they're
helping
taking
you.
advantage
Yeah,
of you.
because like when someone's in need of help and you're actually going out of your way to help them, like they don't have any ability to help you anyways. They shouldn't be. You shouldn't be expecting something in return. You're doing it because
Mm-hmm.
you genuinely want to help them, like those
Mm-hmm.
Kuwaiti girls that or the Hassan atheist guy in Kenya that we helped. Like he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
owe me anything. Like what you know what I mean? Like and I don't feel like he
Yeah.
should pay me back because I just did a small thing that I could, which I raised awareness about his issue or those young ladies and help
Mm-hmm.
people to fundraise, help them fundraise money to get them through this tough time. And that's it. At the end of the day, they don't owe me anything. You're right. So if someone's making you feel like you owe them something, then that's a red flag.
Yes.
And in terms of the theology, in terms of Islam itself, I mean, we've talked about how it's bad for women. We've talked about how it was bad in your family. We talked about how it's coercive. But do you think in general, as a whole, Islam is bad for the world, even the good parts? I mean, the good parts like giving charity and all that. Like, would you still say that you wish people would know that Islam is a bad thing? Like, you still think Islam is bad?
I personally, as a whole, yes,
Mm.
I do think Islam in general is bad, but you can still hold on to certain aspects of it. But I don't think you can attribute a lot of good things
Mm.
just to Islam without also doing the same thing with the bad parts. I don't think
Yeah,
it's fair to say, well, Islam teaches you, patience, and it teaches you how to live in a community and be a helpful person in society. And yeah, it teaches you these wonderful things and it teaches you to be generous. But we
yeah,
have to also focus on the bad things, the things that harm people too. You can't just bring up all these beautiful verses and say, well, look at this, and just ignore how much harm it also has
yeah.
potential for. You have to have both. So in general, yes, I do think it's a bad thing, but I don't necessarily want to see all religions disappear from the world. I feel like you can leave remnants of a religion
Mhm.
without it being harmful anymore. Like we still have remnants of all these other societies before us, the civilization. We have Aztec and Mayan stuff, and people still um, like, they still celebrate these things, even those societies had issues too. They used to have human
Yeah.
sacrifices. There's stuff that we don't condone anymore, but we still appreciate it. And I think just like that, like, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, it can still be appreciated for what it's brought to us, but it doesn't have to be something that we can still constantly protect. We can't keep saying, well, it's such a beautiful religion, so don't talk about it, don't judge it, don't say anything bad about it, respect people's beliefs. We can't do that. It can exist, but we have to be allowed to constantly, um, talk about it. We have to criticize it, and we
Hmm.
can't give it protection. And we can't give bigots and people who use religion to hurt people protection just because of religious sensitivities.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah.
so are would you consider yourself atheist then, or agnostic, or are you believing
I
in
would
another religion
consider
now?
myself. Yeah, I would consider myself an agnostic atheist. Like my view is I don't believe in God, but I'm not like what's it called, militant atheist, where they're like there's no God at all, so don't even bother. I'm just like, I don't know what's out there, but right now I don't know, so I'm just gonna say I don't believe in it.
Oh yeah, that's a
Mm-hmm.
respectable position, and I think most atheists are agnostic atheists. They're not.
Mm-hmm.
Also known as weak atheists, and that's what I call myself too. I'm a weak atheist on a Dawkins scale, meaning that I'm fairly certain there's no God, but I'm remain open to the idea. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, it all depends on what you mean by God, because God can mean a million different things. To
Oh
Hindus,
yeah.
God means something totally different. And to obviously the Abrahamic idea of God, I'm totally against. There's no evidence for any such, like man in the sky that's like sending prophets and talking to them
Mm-hmm.
in their ears and telling them to tell people what to do. And those people have to listen to him. None of that is true. That's all made
Yeah.
up, right? In terms of some
That's kind of how
pure,
I see God too. Like I feel like the way people have like created God. I think God is a creation of humankind. That God as a concept is something else that we don't even know yet. Like it's beyond human comprehension.
yeah,
But like we developed this image of God ourselves, and now every time people talk about God, they kind of assume that we're talking about that God, but it doesn't have to be that
yeah,
God.
yeah.
Mhm.
So just to finish off then, what's next for you now? So you're studying, you said, you're working. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna, don't mention any details, but if there's
Mhm.
anything you want to share with us, that what's happening with your life going forward now, what are your dreams for the future, or goals, anything that's on your mind that you wanted to talk about, just to conclude off. I'll leave
Mhm.
it to you to give the final words.
Okay, so what I'm working on right now, I'm obviously working two jobs. I am studying. I do want to go back to university, and right now I'm kind of in the midst because I kind of got into the situation in the middle of COVID. It's been really hard to kind of build
Oh,
relationships or anything. So I don't really have many like people around me. So I'm trying to find friends. I have met some friends from my shelter that I was at, and at work. So I'm just kind of building a community, trying to find people I can relate to, and then hopefully in the future, like I do want to be a social worker. I do want to work in environments that help people like I was helped. And another thing I want to do more that I have been slacking off for such a long time is work on my blog. I want to write
oh yeah.
more, and hopefully, write a book maybe or something like that. That's one of my goals in life.
Oh, beautiful. Do you have is your blog public? Something you can share?
Yeah,
Should
it's
I-
public. You can.
Okay, so send me the link after. I'll add it to the description. Is there any other social media you want to share? I mean, your Twitter is not open right now, but do you want me to share your Twitter, or do you just leave it at that? Just a blog.
Um, that's okay. You can share it, even though it's private. I'm not really accepting any followers right now, but
Okay.
you can still share it.
Okay, at some point you'll open it up, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so it's been a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sophia, for joining us and having this conversation, and for pouring your heart out and telling your story, despite the risks and despite the consequences to yourself and the relationship with your family that you're worried about. I hope that nothing happens because of this interview, and because you're just
Mm.
speaking your mind. You're just sharing what happened, and you didn't say anything bad about anyone. You just told us how it made you feel, and what you went through, and the experiences that you had, so that someone else doesn't make the same mistakes or goes through the same challenges. Someone that's looking to go through the same steps, has a role model. Now they have you. And it doesn't always work out, as it did for you. And your case was not easy by any means, but
Mm.
we do appreciate you, and all that you've been through. And I wish that things will just get better from now. That your university, you'll be able to do university, you'll be able to become a social worker, and there's going to be a happy ending there. You meet the man of your dreams, not an arranged marriage, but out of your own free choice. And
Yeah.
all of those wonderful things that life will bring. And I hope, I don't know if you want it, but if you do want it, that your family smartens up and accepts you for who you are, and will maybe reestablish a relationship. I don't know. If they do, just be careful, of course, because how they
Mhm.
are better than I do, and how some communities can be. But yeah, for everyone that's here, for who came in support of Sophia, thank you as well for joining us. And thank you for subscribing to the new channel. And we'll see you again, probably for the Two Abdullahs show next week. Take care, everyone, and bye.